All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Optimizing Talent Strategy with OPTM360. We are so thrilled to have you here. We've been friends and partners with Marc and the Talent Strategy Group for a really long time, and we know the impact he has had on the field. But it has been incredible to see the reception of this webinar and how excited so many of you are to join us and learn more about OPTM 360, or maybe actually a lot of you know about OPTM 360 already, but are just eager to find information, how to implement it today, why it's different, and how it can really empower you and your team. So thrilled to have you here, and happy to first welcome also my colleague, Conor Kinsella. He is the head of employee experience strategy here at QuestionPro, and he's been my partner in crime for a long time now, and actually quite the expert in OPTM 360 as well. So it's great to have him join the conversation. And then probably the man who needs no introduction, but I'll do it briefly anyways, Marc Effron, the president of the Talent Strategy Group. And as I mentioned here at QuestionPro, we've had the pleasure of working with Marc and his team for a little bit over 5 years now. And it's just been incredible. I remember one of my favorite stories is when I first had the conversation with Marc and we were talking about our partnership. I reread his OPTM HBR book, chasing my toddler around the house over a weekend because I wanted to refresh my memory and all the great best practices. And it's been so fun to collaborate on his methodology and his team's methodology, because there are so many people who have had such a positive experience with it. And now between Conor and I, we've been able to hear firsthand so many different stories of organizations where OPTM 360 has really transformed their leadership and how it's helped focus and how it's made such a huge change, even maybe after organizations have tried some different 360s. So without further ado, Marc, it is just such an honor to have you here. I feel like every time we have a one-on-one conversation, I'm so happy and I learn so much from you, but to be able to really open it up to all of our friends, colleagues, connections, it's just really heart-filling for me, because I know everyone's going to walk away from this hour without a doubt learning so much. So before Conor and I jump in, and we have so many questions ready for you, just wanted to give you an opportunity to do an introduction for those on the call. Again, I'm guessing a lot of those joining us know you or know of you already. But maybe for those who don't, if you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work, that would be, I think, a wonderful way to get started.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sanja. Conor, great to be with you today. Great to be with all of you out there today. I'm talking about not just this really great tool called the OPTM 360, but how do we accelerate change in our organization? How do we make it easier for leaders to change their behaviors? How do we build better talent faster? How do we get the talent that we need when we need it? Because that's what we're talking about. We've got a great tool to get you there, but what we're really talking about is how do we get to those outcomes that organizations are struggling with, and they throw lots of stuff at tools and classes and courses and coaches and get frustrated they never get there. What we'll talk about today is we think there's a shorter route. I'm Marc Effron. I'm president of a company called the Talent Strategy Group. We do a couple of things. What we mainly do is we help big global companies to radically simplify HR. We work with the best around the world, everyone from Apple to the World Bank to the Saudi government and everybody in between. We also spend a lot of time helping organizations, helping HR leaders to be better at talent management through our Talent Management Institute, which is based at the University of North Carolina. This firm is about 15 years old. Before I started it, I had a real job. Like many of yours, I was either a head of HR or a head of talent management at big companies around the globe. So my mindset is a practitioner mindset, meaning the stuff that we do in HR actually has to work. It's not about cute theories or some academic ideas. So that's going to be the grounding for our conversation today.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Marc. It's always amazing when we get to spend a few minutes catching up. Obviously, I'm a big fan of OPTM 360, and I get the wonderful privilege of speaking with the many other fans of OPTM 360 out there. But for those in the audience that might not be as familiar, maybe we can start there. Just, kind of talking through a little bit about the methodology and what makes it a little bit different from, some of the other 360 solutions out there.
Sure. Well, let's start with the short version of the long story. Many years ago, when I was the head of talent management at a large organization, I was very frustrated by the 360s that I saw out there because they were kind of thick, they were complex, they gave you a score. Sanja, you're a 4.3. It's like, okay, is that good, bad? There was no help. So you're a 4.3. What do I do because I'm a 4.3? They were great if you wanted to assess somebody. There's nothing wrong with assessing people, but oftentimes we in HR thought, oh, they'll lead to development. But there was no logical path from knowing you're a 4.3 to doing something about that, and even knowing if you should do anything about that. My view was a 360 should help you to change your behaviors as quickly and as easily as possible. I channeled my friend, my mentor, Marshall Goldsmith's mindset, which is, why don't we just tell people? Why don't we just make it easy and just tell them what to do? And so the OPTM360 was built for a company at the time to say, we need to accelerate culture change. We need to accelerate behavior change. Why don't we find a way of simply saying, instead of assessing you and saying you're good, you're bad, say, here are some things that you need to either do more of or do less of to be more effective in your role. And specifically from the people you work with, here's exactly what you need to do to get better. So here are the exact ways I want you to show up. And then we're going to prioritize based on how they vote. Here are the top 3 things to do. Top 2 things to do. Simple as that. So my view was, let's make sure that 360s actually help people to change. Let's make it incredibly easy for them to change by saying, here's the beginning of the report. Do these 2 or 3 things. Do them exactly the way that people ask you to, or at least read their suggestions. So the OPTM360 was designed to make it really, really easy for leaders to change based on the input from others around them. It's not an assessment tool. You're not going to learn that somebody is a 4.3 out of 5 on something because we don't consider that to be helpful. What you will learn is they should be doing more of this. It's a first priority, and here's exactly how people want them to change. So the entire point of the tool is accelerate behavior change, which hopefully contributes to better transformation, better leadership growth, faster succession. It gets you to the outcomes I mentioned at the beginning of our call.
And Marc, to that point, how are, whether it's the clients that you're working directly with or just users of the tool, how then are they taking the feedback from the 360 and then incorporating that into the larger talent development programs?
Yeah, there are really a few ways. One is if you're doing it for a larger transformation initiative, so you're incorporating 200 or 400 or 1,000 leaders to say, we need to understand where our strengths and weaknesses are across this swath of leaders. So if we need to transform our organization from behaving like this to behaving like this, let's understand where leaders need to do more or less of certain behaviors to get us to transform from here to there. So in a large scale, it allows us to look across the organization and at the highest level say, we really need leaders to do more of A and B and C. Therefore, we can meet that with programs, with communications, with experiences. So it still can give us that broad organizational scan, but then at the individual level, it then allows us to say, well, for Sue or for Mary or for Rajan or for Juan, they specifically need to work on changing these things. So there's that large scale change effort. But then there's just the typical individual improvement. We want Susie to be an even better leader. Great. Let's give her this as a piece of guidance to feed into her development plan to make sure she is clear on what those around her, her peers, her boss, her directs, her other leaders that she works with, let's help her understand what they would love her to do more of or less of to be an even more effective leader. So kind of classic individual development, but here's the difference between typical 360 and OPTM 360. From OPTM 360, Susie's going to know exactly what to do. So the transition from getting a report to taking action is going to be very short. Unlike a typical 360, again, you find out you're a 4.3, I don't know what to do. OPTM360, you're going to hear, hey, guess what? You're a little bit quiet in team meetings. We'd love to hear your voice more on areas A and B. Cool. You can put that into action this afternoon. So there's the individual elements as well. So we're seeing it used in all the typical ways, but really when organizations want to accelerate that change, when they want a more practical way to make that change happen.
Well, thank you for highlighting all of those different areas. And I want to double down in a couple because I know probably a lot of people are taking notes. And as they do, I'll reiterate a couple of things that you said that it just have frequently come up in conversations. One is the focus of the methodology and the tool, and the idea that, when you were mentioning somebody getting a 4.3, early in my career, I had a 360 done. And I'm an IO psychologist. I was super excited. I was young in my career. I had this 360. I had all this data. And so, of course, in 360s, you can see how your manager rates you. That's the one score usually that's not collapsed with everything else. So I went to my manager, and in some areas, she didn't give me very good scores, but it's okay. I'm young. I want to learn. I was eager. And I asked her, well, could you please tell me why you gave me a 3? And she said, oh, I gave you a 3? Oh, goodness, I'm kind of surprised. I don't know. I don't know if she did. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm pretty sure she knew, but I'm pretty sure she didn't expect me to come. And for those of you who even don't know me, you can probably tell that I'm not like I'm not a person who attacks someone. So I said it, I think, very tactfully. And so in your methodology, one of the things that you were talking about is even the way that feedback, is given. One, that it's focused. It's not on so many different items, but it's also in a way that's suggests to a person more specifically what they can do. And another thing that I wanted to touch on is the recommendations. And I think you've written about this before as well. So in the world of AI, we all want AI recommendations. We all want automated recommendations. But one of the points that you make is that there are a lot of things that are contextual to an organization that, I don't know what AI is capable of. I'm sure in the future it's going to take all of it. But today, it's still not quite intelligent enough to be able to grab everything, all the context around each individual person and really provide constructive recommendations or really actionable suggestions. And so that's one of the things that I've also seen very powerful about OPTM360 is that the person is asked to make a recommendation, and those people are the ones who know the individual the best, right? They know the context of the organization, they know how they work together. So those kinds of recommendations are always going to be worth their weight in gold. And so creating in many ways a platform that feels very welcoming to have people provide those kinds of recommendations without, the worry of being retaliated on or wanting to do it, I think is really, really critical. So I just wanted to double down on a couple of those because I think
Well, I love those observations, Sanja, and I think you doubled down on two important pieces. One is, and again, I'll use Marshall Goldsmith's language for those of you who know him, it's very much a feed-forward tool. We are not assessing what you've done in the past. We're not saying you're good at something, you're bad at something. We're saying, hey, you might want to turn the dial up or turn the dial down a little bit to be an even better performer going forward. All of the suggestions are future-focused suggestions. Hey, you might want to do this more or less going forward. And so what you remove what happens with typical 360s, where we all have a self-serving bias. We all typically think we're a little bit better than we actually are. So we're not going to respond well to being a 4.3 because we think we're a 4.5. I don't know who that idiot was who said we're a 4.3. And so we remove that entirely. It's difficult to argue with, you should do a little more of something. It's a very difficult thing to argue with. Hey, going forward, you might want to do. So we remove that emotional component from the survey, which is a huge deal, absolutely huge deal. So if we understand one of the reasons people don't take action is because that self-serving bias, because our brains are very powerful in saying, you're very good already, resist when people say you should change. 360 or OPTM 360 simply says, hey, here's some interesting ways that you might want to get better. And to your point around AI will be able to do lots of great things. And I know that you all are integrating AI into a lot of your tools, but let's say that the three of us are in a meeting. And whenever I want to make a point, I go like this in your face. The feedback on the 360 is going to be, hey, Mark, a lot of times what you do is you might want to not put your hands up. Okay, AI is not doing that. It's not saying that. So the contextual piece that you mentioned is critical. Or you always roll your eyes when Conor brings up baseball as an analogy. It's like, okay, those types of things, subtle things, but those are oftentimes the silly little things that get in the way of individual success. And it's the type of comment that oftentimes we need to hear about, hey, things are great, but there's this little thing and it's become a bigger thing. It's fine that you're a manager. When you become a director, that's not going to work. Those are the things that human beings are going to notice. They are completely contextual. They might be subtle. And they're the types of things that OPTM360 allows people to get an insight from, where a typical 360 is not. And AI right now may be able to consolidate information well. It certainly can't assess or understand or process clues like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I don't think you necessarily did this on purpose, but a lot of the suggestions you gave were tied to emotional intelligence. And it'll be interesting to see how, as AI evolves inside organizations and we can automate a lot of what we're doing, how those exact cues that you mentioned are going to become significantly more important, because in some ways, maybe we'll be able to level out our input, like how good was the piece of writing that I did, or how good was the project plan, but how I'm communicating that to you and how I'm taking your recommendations or your advice or communicating with my team, that I can't automate. And that the AI tools that I interacted with to do the projects won't know about. So that's something for people to keep in mind. It actually ties into my next question around best practices for 360s. So that's something that we've gotten a lot of questions about. So there are different methodologies in approaching 360s. And we actually had a question from the audience too, from Anne, for ideas to how to present tools to leadership. So are there things that you're seeing in the environment today, in workplaces, inside organizations, where maybe organizations need to be doing something differently, or what have best practices to make sure your 360s are effective? Have they changed over the last few years?
I think the challenge is they haven't changed, but they should. So I think a lot of times, because we in HR love tools and we understand the benefit of using the tools, so we've already internalized the benefit, we sell the tool. I've never walked into an executive saying, this 360 is cool, your team member should take it. I might walk in saying, hey, would you love another 5% performance out of your team this year? Like, no, you have my attention, Mark. Great, let's talk about it. I've got a way I think I can get that done. The tool is a vehicle to elevate individual performance, to elevate team performance, to accelerate change. What am I selling? I'm selling an outcome. If you walk in selling a tool, you're going to be met like someone who's selling a tool. If you walk in selling an outcome, you're likely going to have someone listen to you. So if you say, hey, I love OPTM 360, I'm going to describe what a cool tool it is. Well, it is a cool tool, but let's think about the outcome you're trying to produce and talk about that, because most leaders want a few things. One, they want to meet their goals. So one, do you know their goals? And can you describe how OPTM 360 is going to help them to achieve their goals more quickly than they might otherwise? Can you link it to elevated performance, changed behaviors, faster transformation? It can do all those things because leaders are going to behave differently once they get very practical, specific, easy to actionize feedback from it. So I think the challenge is, in many cases, we're still selling tools in HR. We need to think about what's the outcome that we're trying to sell to our leaders, because our leaders do want those things. They want more performance. They want faster change. They want to feel more comfortable about making their goals. We need to lead by saying, hey, let's talk about how a 360 instrument is going to get you there more quickly and more successfully than other things you might do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I definitely see how sometimes if we don't almost practice or even maybe role play with our colleagues, the way we communicate something, even with the best intentions at heart, talk about that road versus the destination. So I would say even somebody doing, before you have a conversation with the executives, maybe working on that with your team and having somebody challenge you if you didn't quite get there yet, or did you have the conversations to know what is most important in the organization today, because maybe that's changed a little bit. And so usually if you can find number 1, 2, or 3 most important thing to your leadership, they're going to be a lot more open to even trying different things or experimenting than if it's something that's like number 10 on the list, because a lot of us don't have the capacity for all of that or the budget necessarily today. So if you want to get to the top ones, you have much greater likelihood of achieving that outcome.
Exactly. Which is one reason, and the whole concept behind OPTM, one-page talent management, is let's make it as easy as possible for people to take the right actions. And so if you're in that meeting with that leader, they want to hear words like simple, fast, easy, and you can deliver those. So those aren't just words you're throwing out there. That's the entire point of the tool, is we want to make change simpler and faster and easier, and empathize with them. So I'm sure they've rolled their eyes when they got a 50-page 360 that didn't prioritize and told them they were a 4.321 on something, and they were like, what the heck is this? You can empathize and say, yeah, I've seen a lot of crappy 360s in my life too, and I've been frustrated with them too, and they haven't driven any change. And the science says most people don't change when they get a 360. Actually, the science is really powerful. Most people do not change behaviors when they get a 360 because they get the 360 on the bad side of what we've just described here. So empathize with that leader that you're talking to and say, yeah, I know a lot of the times that you've seen this before, it probably hasn't worked. Let's talk about a simpler way of getting there. Why don't we just tell your leaders on your team what they need to do more of or less of and tell them exactly how to do it? Does that sound like a reasonable approach? Guarantee you there'll be a lot of these going on in that conversation.
Yeah, because I don't think that the idea of development and helping people get better and helping people learn or introspect more effectively, like I need to figure out what the stat is. But recently a friend of mine told me that I think only something like 7% of people actually have like accurate self-reflections. Like most of us, are a little bit off, maybe some of us a little bit more than others, it depends. But just knowing that probably the way you perceive yourself is different than the way others perceive you. And that's why it's so incredibly valuable to get input. That's really eye-opening. And to me, when she shared that statistic, and I think it's 7%, but don't quote me on it. I'll look it up
Sounds
again.
reasonable.
It does. And all of a sudden, at least for me, when I heard that, it made me feel a lot more comfortable and I'm probably one of those people that doesn't understand myself really well. But if you think like, oh, maybe like 80% of people are really good at self-introspection. So if I'm the 20%, I must be a really bad leader. It's actually quite the opposite. And so once we realize that, listen, it's just human nature, and it is impossible for us to be at complete understanding how we're coming off to all the different people we're interacting with our lives. The sooner we know that, I think like the guard goes down and says, okay, let me know. But again, maybe with not like a 3-point and a 5-point scale, there's still a better way to change the behavior.
And I think to your point, Sanja, it also means we in HR, we in the consulting community might be more familiar with that. We might feel we're more self-aware, and it's easy to project that on others and recognize, no, the vast majority of people are not. Even if they've gotten a 360 once in their lives, they didn't magically become self-aware after that. They still have all their self-serving biases going on in their head like we all do. So let's stop saying, well, why didn't they change? They got a 360. No, flip that. Why should they have changed? 360 isn't some magical instrument to get them there. Let's make it super simple and easy to help them take action by telling them what to do and prioritizing how to do it.
Absolutely.
And that brings up a good point, Marc, that I'd love to get your thoughts on, right? So we've kind of been hitting on a little bit, but in my experience working with our 360 clients, it almost takes a village to have a successful 360 program, right? Like it can't be one rogue person or one champion, right? It's kind of that collective feedback coming from all angles. So in your experience, looking at programs like OPTM360, where does that impact manifest itself, like in the larger organization? And then on the flip side, like what are just some common pitfalls that you see organizations make when it comes to rolling out and deploying a 360 program?
Yeah, I'd suggest the starting point has to be, are we clear about the behaviors that are going to allow us to win as an organization? Are we clear about the behaviors that are going to allow us to win? Now, what I do not mean by that is, do we have a 50-page competency guide? Those are not behaviors that will allow us to win. That is, you bought something from a consulting firm. That's different. Do you know what the 3, 4, 5 behaviors are that will truly differentiate people who are going to help your organization to change. Great. Do you understand how people compare against those behaviors? Let's start there. So one, if you passionately believe that if everyone engages in these 5 behaviors, we're going to get to whatever our objectives are, whatever our strategy is more quickly, then that should hopefully cause people to say, hey, we want to have some assessment tool against that. We want to make sure that we understand where people are so that we can drive change more quickly against it. So I think the one starting point has to be, are we clear about what types of behaviors we need going forward? Do we know the ones that are going to drive us to be most successful? And that hopefully will cause them to say, hey, we want to understand what that gap looks like between where we want to be and where we are today, so we can put in place whatever mechanisms we need to accelerate closing that gap. So what was the second part of the question, Conor? I got so excited about answering the first
reverse side of it, just pitfalls, not necessarily specific to OPTM 360, but 360s in general, where
absolutely. So all the obvious ones, most 360s never have a development plan coming out of them. It is so easy. Let's say that you're my manager, Conor. Really easy. Hey, Mark, we just invested for 360 for you. We're going to pick one thing, just one thing. We're going to pick one thing that you need to change over the next 3 months, not 6, not 12, 3 months. Let's agree on what that is. Here's how we're going to measure that. Real solid measure, not, we'll figure out if it's decent or not. No, real solid measure. Great, 3 months, there's a follow-up. We know deadlines drive action. Pretty clear IO psychology. Deadlines drive action. So missing that, no, people aren't going to take action. If you've just given me feedback on stuff that I haven't changed because I don't want to, and then you're not going to force me to do it, I'm not going to do it. So one, clear development plan. Second, and this is related to it, managerial care. Do you care as my manager that I actually change my behaviors? Are you paying attention? Are you coaching me? Are you giving me feedback around it? The third is just higher level support to say, yes, it is worth investing, at least in a selection, not every manager maybe, but at least in a selection of our managers, to say, we really want to focus on this tranche of managers being even better tomorrow than they are today, and we're willing to invest in making that happen. And again, for OPTM 360, we're not talking a huge investment. This is a very reasonably priced tool. So we're not saying, this is an executive education program that's going to cost you $500,000. Is the executive team willing to spend a small amount of money to have a meaningful impact, because we're giving people clear direction about the behaviors they should engage in going forward? So when we don't see development plans, when we don't see managers taking keen interest, when we don't see the senior team saying this is worth our investment, this stuff falls apart. But that's incumbent on us as HR leaders to say, hey, we have a way that we think will help to bridge strategy to individuals, and it is making sure they understand the few most important things they need to change going forward and making it easy for them to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to what you were mentioning there, in my experience, again, where I've seen it fail as well is just, like you said, when folks see it as a checkbox activity, right? Maybe it's my direct manager that sees it as that checkbox, and they're not really putting their best foot forward from a developmental perspective. And then, I'm kind of left with, random bits of feedback of how to get better. But yeah, it takes a village.
One other suggestion on that, and this is something that we teach in all of our talent management institutes, it's an incredibly simple framing of the development journey. We call it the from-to statement. So if you're my manager, Conor, you would sit down with me and say, hey, Mark, based on everything I know about you, including the OPTM 360 feedback, I think that you should move from being a technical expert in HR who depends on that expertise to find value to being a leader in HR who can bring a team along to a strategy that you have set based on your knowledge of the business. From to statement. Here's where I see you today. Here's where I'd like you to get in the future. Is that a journey you want to go on? Question one. If so, then great. Let's talk about what the plan looks like to get from here to there. But most managers have never had that from to conversation. Most leaders love to throw out, oh, you should take a course, you should get a coach, but they never say, well, here's the journey. I see you showing up like this today. That might be okay, but I would love for you to show up like this tomorrow. Here's what it takes to get from the from to the to. OPTM 360 is one great way to fill in that space of, and here's some of the behaviors that you might want to engage in to accelerate that journey.
Oh, it's such a great example. And actually, I'm going to skip over one question because the next one is really related to this. So a lot of times when organizations do 360s, they pair them with executive coaching, right? It's a diagnostic, and then you go through a series of sessions. And of course, there's benefits there. But of course, it's also oftentimes very cost prohibitive. It is not scalable. It is just not something that's a given, that a 360 can only be effective with coaching. I loved your from to statement. And I think that, one, it's great for managers to articulate it. Two, it's probably a really good time of reflection when a manager is having their team go through the exercise to think about what are the potential futures for these different employees, and like, how do we move them from where they are today? Like, where can they be most even helpful to the organization and to the team? And if that matches their personal aspirations, that's fantastic. Because one of the things that I see in a lot of our client surveys and a lot of our market research is that career development consistently is an area that organizations get hit on the most. Like, people want more and more. And I think this is a great exercise, again, both for the manager, what's necessary for the organization, and to say it out loud and say, if we agree that you want to go from here to here, how do we effectively do that? And how do I effectively support you as your leader in that? What are some other strategies that organizations can do? Because one of the things that in pulling through the 360 effectively, because again, I could see, depending on somebody's experience, so, going back to trying to convince somebody to go through a 360 program or invest in that in their organization and the reason for it, sometimes people are very reliant on their own personal experiences from before. So if you get an executive that had a 360 and had this coach, and especially if the coach was really amazing, they would say, oh, but we shouldn't do that because we can't afford coaching right now, so better not have the 360. So I love the from to philosophy and exercise. What are some other things you would recommend? Because I do think this is a real big area for people looking at 360s.
Sure. Well, a few things come to mind when I think of what is the role of the coach following a 360. Typically, it's a few things. One is suggestions for change, it's follow-up, and it's accountability. Well, those are three things that we've tried very hard to build into the OPTM 360. So by definition, when you're filling out as a respondent the OPTM 360s, you're providing me with a suggestion for change on each of the three priority items. So you're already telling me, here's what you should be doing. So we've already then checked one box. We're giving you very specific, in fact, probably more specific than a coach would. Here's how I would like you to show up going forward. Follow-up. Well, this is where the manager comes in. If the manager says, we need to put in place a development plan, you need to go back to everyone who completed the survey, and I consider this to be absolute best practice. You need to go back to everyone who completed the survey and say, one, thank you for completing the survey. I don't know who said what, but here's the general feedback that I received, and here's the action plan I've committed to around that survey. Do you have any suggestions for me about either what I should add to that action plan or how I can be more successful? I would love your help and your support in completing this action plan. Now, people oftentimes say, well, that'd be so embarrassing to go back to these people and share my 360. It's like, who do you think filled it out? It's like, they already knew you behaved that way. It's like, they'll know I talk too much in team meetings. It's like, they're the ones who said you talk too much in team meetings. So yeah, let's get rid of the embarrassment factor, because you're the last one to know. Everybody else already knew. So go back and say, yeah, I've got a plan. I'm going to talk less in team meetings. You okay with that? They're gonna be like, yeah, we're okay with that. And flag for me when I'm not doing it. So one thing a coach might do is kind of do that follow-up. Great. Take accountability to go out and do it yourselves, and then just accountability along the way. Are you following up on the plan? That's ideally where the manager comes in, even just on a quarterly basis. Ideally, it's monthly, 15 minutes. Hey, how's that OPTM 360 development plan coming along? I know you're going to work on A. Tell me how A is working for you. Doesn't need to be a big deal. Doesn't need to be an hour-long meeting. It's enough accountability that I know if Sonya's my manager, oh crap, end of the month I'm meeting with her. I better make sure I followed up on something. So when I think about the role of a coach, coaches are great if they're needed. But one of the things that we try to do with OPTM 360 is make it a much more self-sufficient instrument where you already have suggestions for change. You can build in follow-up very easily on your own, and managers can help with accountability for ensuring you're taking the steps that you need to take. So love coaches when they're necessary. I would suggest they're probably not necessary anywhere near the amount that they're actually used in corporate America.
Yeah. Well, and I would say what I love about the 3 examples that you gave, or three phases, is as you were giving examples of how to actually have accountability or the suggestions for change or follow-up, like they felt reasonable to me. Nothing that you said, I was like, oh, Mark, like you're in your ivory tower, or you're like living with rainbows and unicorns, and this actually doesn't happen. And something else that I'd say, and of course I would love for everybody that's listening to us to do OPTM 360, if today they're not, I also think your suggestions are real for any behavioral change. Like we might even know, without a 360 right now, that there's something I need to change about my behavior because it's come up from my leader, or it's come up from my team, or, in whatever way. But I do think as humans, sometimes we get stuck in these, ruts where like, I do want to change, but how do I do it? And is it hard? And what steps? And I think that these are very, like, I was writing them down because I want to resend them out to the world, because I do think it's something that's very manageable for change to actually happen and sustain. It's that accountability. And one thing that I was going to add, because it's not rocket science, that I was giggling to myself a long time ago, I read that there's a big difference in your mentality if you say, I'm going to try to do something, or I will do something, because that try kind of gives you a way out. Like, I'm going to try to talk less, or
Absolutely.
I commit to that I will talk less. And so just that little bit of a change in how something is articulated really changes that commitment to others. So I that's what I'm saying. It's kind of a goofy one, but I'll throw that one in with your
That's powerful.
Recommendations.
It's super powerful, because if I meet with you and Conor and I say, hey, one of the things I'm going to try and do is speak less, even though I say try to do is speak less in team meetings, I kind of shared that I know I don't do it well, and that you told me I don't do it well. Therefore, I'm going to feel kind of stupid if during follow-up I hear from both of you, nope, still engaged in that behavior. So just that public commitment to I'm going to try to do something better is a very powerful motivator. It's that fear of embarrassment, and that's a wonderful motivator. I'm absolutely fine using that as a motivator. Public pledge of, hey, in 6 months you're going to see me behaving like this. And it's like, oh crap, I better start behaving like that then, because I don't want to be embarrassed 6 months from now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll ask another one that's maybe a little bit of I don't love this question, but I think it's the reality of our world today, is that we're seeing a lot of layoffs happening, which also impacts HR teams. We're seeing a lot smaller budgets in a lot of cases in HR more than bigger budgets. I've rarely encountered somebody that's like, I have so much money this year, I'm so excited, I can do everything that I want. So given that reality, that's, maybe a little bit more abrupt this year, but not uncommon. I look at leadership development as something that's, again, coming from our background, it'd be hard to not look at leadership development as something that's absolutely necessary. But when we think about and, juggle our lives, when we say we need to exercise and eat healthy and drink water and get sleep, like, to me, leadership development is one of those core foundational necessities for organizations. But probably not everyone views it that way. Everyone, I'm sure, who is joining this conversation with us is taking an hour out of their life because they do believe that. If they're in the position, and that was, one of the questions before, how do we convince somebody? And you had talked about, the end result versus tools. I wanted to double down on that a little bit more and see if you have more advice in that area, because it is probably a reality a lot of people are facing, and again, are here because they believe in it and they want to infuse that inside their organization, but either they've already come up against objections or roadblocks, or want to better equip themselves before they do, so they don't have to go back scrambling. So what would be your advice for even somebody that maybe didn't have a budget cut, but just doesn't have a lot of budget and has to make decisions? How do we continue to make 360's OPTM 360 leadership development a priority?
Sure. I've been in a lot of corporations. I've been in some huge transformations. One of the things I found to be a constant is that there is always money for high potentials. There is always money for high potentials. If you're an organization that has, I don't know what your revenues are, 500 million, a billion, 10 billion, I guarantee you there's at least $5,000 or $10,000 sitting out there that is available for high potentials. So I would start, if you're in a transformation, well, especially if you're in a transformation, I would say we need to ensure that our highest potential leaders are very clear on what they can do to be incredibly effective. The odds that you'll get an argument around that from the senior team are extraordinarily small. So let's start there. Everybody loves it when high potentials are successful. What's the least expensive possible way for you to help them do that? OPTM 360 and manager follow-up. So you're talking about the most important group in the organization using probably the least expensive methodology you have to get huge benefit. So I would start there. Now, they might say, well, shouldn't we focus on our high performers as well? You're like, oh, okay, sure, boss. But start narrow, because there's always budget for the best. And it's oftentimes when we try to sell the big program, oh, we should send all 5,000 of our top leaders through this, and it's going to cost us $8.5 million. And then they're like, oh, thanks, HR. But it's when we start narrow, let them sell outward. Let's start selling narrow. Let's have them say, hey, maybe we should invest in a few more people around this.
Yeah, that's a really great insight. It actually is something I maybe should have thought about more before than I haven't, because again, as you're saying it, I'm not surprised, but I'm also like, I haven't thought about the investment in high potential specifically. So I'm also hopeful that our friends on the call haven't either, because it does, to your point, make budgets a lot more manageable. And then it tells the story itself. Like, you see that escalation, you see the people who are, the best performance in your organization and making really big impact, doing even better as a result of the advice or priorities they got from their 360. All of a sudden, we want to elevate more people. And I know that even in a really tricky economy where there are a lot of layoffs, most high performers know that they are, and they know that they're employable somewhere else. And so that would probably be another reason to invest in their development, because you want to find these different ways to actually help them do even better, but also show them that you are investing in them, that there is still belief in the organization, and that you believe that if they can, have the tools to perform even better, or have the knowledge and be upskilled, that they're going to have an even greater impact in the organization. And putting money towards their development further shows value in them during a time that maybe bonuses are a little bit harder, pay raises are a little bit harder. That development really becomes in many ways a win-win for the person in the organization. So I think maybe framing all of those different things could cumulatively help.
Absolutely. If you go to the boss and you say, boss, I want to make sure that your best team members feel valued, are as capable as possible, know that we're investing in them, you can send a very positive message to them. It's going to cost you a few $100s per employee. Are you willing to do that? Guarantee you, boss is going to say yes. They'll probably say, and how do we focus on our people? Great, let's have that conversation too. But to your original question, in times when there's transformation, when budgets are tight, focus on that narrow group first, expand outward from there.
Marc, one of the things that you've been really passionate about and talked about is the difference between using OPTM 360 as a development platform versus 360s that are out there as assessments. And the more you're talking and the more we're thinking, like, you're challenging my way of thinking of that journey and what the impact is. Have you experienced that just saying the words 360 sometimes puts people on an offensive? Like, is there anything to the branding, or is that not like as heavy? Because I'm just this, the latest bit of our conversation, just investing in top performers and getting them to develop, like, to me, that's what every organization should be doing. And it's one of the more like, I shouldn't say altruistic things, because obviously it benefits the organization, but have you ever encountered that just the name 360 kind of gets people, like if they've had a bad experience, that it sends them there? Like, is there, or do you think it's okay? I'm just trying to think of in conversations that people are having, do they go with OPTM? Do they go automatically with 360? Like, does it matter? I don't know.
No, I think if in your organization you've used 360s as an excuse to fire people, if you use 360s as a way to offload managerial responsibility for feedback to a tool, then yeah, people are going to say, oh, 360, am I getting fired? Then yeah, maybe it's OPTM development tool. Whatever language you want to put around it, because let's talk about, what does this tool do? It provides you with specific guidance for how to be a better leader. Now, most 360s don't do that. So in many ways, the only 360 part of this is we ask everybody around you how you can do that. But it's not the typical 360 where it's you're good or bad at something. So if people are going to have an emotional reaction to 360, call this whatever you want to call it, because what we're talking about is the core outcome is people are going to understand very clearly the few things they can get better at and exactly how to get better at them. And that feels like a pretty good gift to me. And it's going to do it in a way that's not going to hit their self-serving bias, make them feel bad about themselves, or kind of bounce off resistance that they would have saying, oh, I'm not a 4.3, I'm a 4.7. And so I think it's a great point. If there is a negative connotation to 360s, either in your organization or with your managers, just back to our earlier discussion, describe the outcome that this thing is going to produce. You're not there to sell an OPTM 360. You're there to describe an outcome that you're going to give to the organization. You happen to have this really cool tool that's going to allow you to get there.
Yeah. Marc, for the people on the call that maybe haven't kind of formally built out a 360 program, but they're thinking about it, right? You got the wheels turning here a little bit. Let's say they want to go to executive leadership to present this case of why they should invest in 360s or OPTM 360. Can you maybe talk a little bit about defining success, or what success looks like in an OPTM 360, right? Because it's not assessing, it's not, comparing a 4.2 to, you grew to a 4.6 over the past 6 months. But what is that when they can kind of look back in 6 to 12 months and say, yes, this program was absolutely successful, and kind of how does that manifest itself?
Sure. So I think where I'd want to go is, let's say we have 10 leaders that go through the OPTM 360. I would want them each to have one specific behavior that they have committed to change. Ideally, that flows directly from the OPTM 360. Let's say they pick one of the top 3. And that what we'll do is in a year, we'll remeasure. Because again, this is a very affordable instrument, and we'll see if the degree of change desired, so the scale is do much more, do more, don't change, do less, do much less, if the degree of change has reduced. Because if this year everybody said I should do much more of something, and a year from now it's maybe between a do more and a don't change, then I've made progress on that item. So there is very specific measurement possible as well. And we're not trying to get cute with the measurement of, you went from a 4.7 to a 4.75. That's meaningless. Having people say, actually, you needed to change a lot. Now you're actually pretty good. I trust that measurement a lot more than the false precision that people throw up based on those numbers. So yes, I would say that if I'm looking for a measure, I'm looking for behavior change as measured by the people who assessed me the first time around. Has that behavior moved in the direction that they wanted it to?
I didn't think you could make it any simpler, but you did. Take that 3 down to 1. Nothing else.
I love it.
Yeah, and again, that also goes to, it's so easy to say, I mean, I grew up where you had like 3 development plan items. I don't recall anyone in my life who ever got all 3 development items done. Let's not do that. What's your one development item? Get that done. Cool. What's your next development item? Cool. What's your next? But get them done sequentially. Most people don't even get their 3 regular goals done. Why do we think they're going to get their 3 development goals done? I'd much rather have you do one great development goal, ace it, cool. What's next? Cool. Let's move down that road, as opposed to wasting our time coming up with 3 that we know really aren't going to happen.
We are splicing that, shouting it off the rooftops, because I'm putting myself, well, maybe in my shoes, because I'm very type A, conscientious, want to always be top performer. And when you get different targets you feel like are impossible to meet, it is very discouraging. And from the get-go, you're like, I'm just setting myself up for failure. I don't want to do this. And so to your point, being much more realistic about it and focusing what's unmanageable is going to be a lot more empowering to people, a lot more energizing, a lot more motivating than looking at something and saying, I understand I have opportunities to get better. All of us do. But if these are the expectations and there's no way that I can meet them, like, what's the point? Like, that's where that frustration is. So as you were saying that, I was like literally like recording it in my head for myself to play it on playback. I think from your words to my heart, absolutely great advice. So we just have a few minutes left. We've been getting really great questions from our listeners. I'll ask one more, and then if any of you have any burning questions you want to grab Marc about, make sure to type them in so we can see if we can manage them in the last few minutes. But so we talked a lot about tying the purpose of OPTM360 to outcomes more so than talking about it being a tool. And one of the goals of many organizations is to become leaner and more reliant on AI. So how does OPTM help leaders better involve in that kind of scenario? Like if that's somebody's reality, and it's probably the reality of like 99.9% of people who are on this call, if you're tying OPTM strategy to that outcome, how would you make that argument for that journey?
Sure. Well, I think there's a few ways to do that. I think one is, let's include that as one of the behaviors or one of the capabilities we're measuring. Do you need to be, much more capable in AI? Probably not much less or less, but at least on the positive side of that scale, let's see where people rate you. Because while we all like to think, oh, we all need to be perfect at it, it could be that there are some people who we want to see be much more focused on it, and other people who were not as concerned. So let's incorporate AI fluency, or however you want to describe that, as one of the things that we measure in the tool, so people have the opportunity to rate whether that should be one of your priority items. And if so, they're going to tell you in the suggestions that they provide, hey, I'd like to see you incorporate AI more into your work by doing blah, 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 blah. That's going to give you specific guidance around what to do. So I think one of the nice things that allows you to differentiate, instead of saying everyone needs to be perfect at AI, it's like, well, actually, probably not. It's like saying everyone needs to be strategic. No, actually they don't. Some people don't need to be strategic at all. They need to get stuff done every day. Same thing with AI. Why don't we allow people to rate, allow people to give suggestions for, here's how I think you should show up with AI. And I think that will allow us to really differentiate who needs to invest more, as opposed to saying there's this broad brush that we all need to be perfect at anything, because that doesn't apply to any capability in any organization. As popular of a topic as AI is, we can all probably learn a little bit more, but some of us might not need to be brilliant at it in order to be successful at work. Others might need to be.
Yeah, that's a really great recommendation for personalizing it more, because now what I'm seeing is a lot of times it's like blanket statements, mandates across the organization. We all need to do more. We all need to do better. We all. And then people, I think, sometimes get excited and sometimes get terrified because they don't know, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? And you can get that anecdotally in conversations, but it's not as easy. And sometimes you want to open that up because, again, if the mandate is that everyone has to be using AI all the time for everything, you might be thinking, I'm not yet. And so I don't want to hear that again from people. But to your point, like for everything else in business, it's not equal across every role. And we can only prioritize so much. And so to be able to get that input from the different people we're interacting with, to know this is where I really need to spend my time. I think today, even for people's like mental health, when it comes to focus and deciding what they need to do more of, or maybe less of, I think that individualized feedback could not be more valuable.
Yeah, I think guidance in this area is especially helpful. And it goes to things like, let's use a receptionist as an example. A receptionist probably has some ideas for how to use AI in his job. But structurally, you might be saying 3 levels up. Actually, what if we AI'd the receptionist? And that's actually the change we make. So it's one thing to say, oh, everyone needs to think about this, but there might be larger structural or organizational things we're thinking about that makes it silly to put this burden on every individual when maybe we're thinking about it in a different way. And that should be the first way we apply it, as opposed to having kind of little things happening throughout the organization.
Absolutely. Conor, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, good on questions. All right. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Marc. This is great. It's what I've been eating, breathing, and sleeping for the past 6 to 8 months. So it's great to hear you doubling down on a lot of the stuff that makes this tool so effective. So thanks again. Love the partnership. Love working with you. And I'll just throw this out there quick, since we are live. Sanja will probably kill me after this, but I will reach out to everyone on the webinar today with a special offer for OPTM 360s if Sanja doesn't kill me. But
oh, absolutely not. If you said Sanja might reach out to everyone, I might have to look at my agenda, but I'm all in. I'm absolutely all in. Marc, it's been such a pleasure. Like I said, from day one, getting to know you more personally and seeing the passion in your work and just how clearly and eloquently you talk about different things that, for many people, it's just much more complicated to get our thoughts straight. I appreciate that so much. Of course, we were here today to talk about OPTM 360, and Conor will follow up with his special offer with everyone on the webinar. But I just wanted to open up the opportunity. You're so well known and well respected in our field, and Talent Management Institute does a lot more than OPTM 360s. For those who are on the call and interested in getting in touch with you or learning more about what you do, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Well, first, just a big thanks to both of you. For people out there who are wondering, well, how do you all work together? OPTM ideas flawlessly executed through QuestionPro. Just think about it. That's simply, we've had this idea for many years. QuestionPro helps it to be flawlessly executed. So that's the partnership between us, and we love that partnership. And obviously we do a lot more than that too, to Sanja's point. We help lots of organizations around the globe to radically simplify HR strategy, HR operating model, down into the weeds of performance management, talent reviews, hypo acceleration, all the things that a lot of the listeners today focus on. And we educate leaders through our Talent Management Institute based at UNC. So feel free to visit our website at talentstrategygroup.com to learn more. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Marc. Thank you so much, Conor. And so for all the amazing things that Marc talked about, feel free to reach out to Marc directly. And for OPTM 360 in particular, either Conor will be reaching out to you shortly, or please feel free to reach out to Conor directly. Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Conor. Thank you, everybody who joined us. It was amazing to spend this hour with you, and we look forward to talking with all of you soon. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.